Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So, how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and we are on episode 238. And today we have a very special guest. We have Tanisha Parrish, and she is a visionary executive coach and business strategist who unlocks the potential of individuals, teams, and organizations. She is the CEO of Life Under Innovation, a human transformation company that unlocks human potential through executive coaching and leadership development programs. Additionally, Tanisha has 20 plus years of experience as a strategic and operational leader at global companies of all sizes, from startups to Fortune 500. She holds an MBA from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and a Bachelor of Science in Organizational Change from Northwestern University. We are so lucky to have her on. Tanisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. It's always interesting to hear yourself spoken about. So thank you.
Well, you've had such a fabulous, rich life and history, and I am curious, how did you get into organizational change? Because when I think one of just when I was growing up, there is no way I would have known what that even meant, let alone said, this is what I want to pursue. So I'd love to hear why organizational change, why leadership, what made you go down that path?
Yeah. So I love that you're going backwards because organizational change was a major that I discovered while in college. Coming into college, I went to this program in that exposed you to business school. So I had a sense that I wanted to do something in this business world. And my Northwestern did not have an undergraduate business school. They have a great graduate, but not undergraduate. So the next best thing was economics. So I came in, I'm going to be an econ major. And I took macro, micro, another course in econometrics. And by the time I got to econometrics, it was a hard stop on econ. And I just had the realization where you look back in your teens and college years, and sometimes you're like, I wasn't that smart, but then other times you're like, huh, I was pretty insightful. So I just said to myself, if I'm going to spend 4 years in a major, it's not going to be econ. It has to be something that gets me excited. So I went on this kind of just curiosity journey. I just started talking to people like, what are you doing? What are you majoring in? And Northwestern had four majors in this School of Education and Social Policy. One was, I think, psychology, one was social policy. There was an education major, and then learning and organizational change is what they called it. And everybody that I talked to like happened upon this major and they loved it. So long story short, it was an intersection between business and psychology and how humans interact in a workplace. And I loved it. Like every class I went to, I loved the discussion. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but all I knew is every time I had a class in my major, I was running that class. So that's how I landed on the major. And I'll tell you, coming out, so this was in 2001 when I graduated. I thought I was going to have an opportunity to work and design cultures and design organizations. And everyone that was hiring, they were hiring for PhDs in org change. So
Mm.
there was an interesting step I had and pivot I had to take in terms of my expectations of the type of work I was doing. So that's how I found org change.
So, when you were in corporate for over 20 years, what what was the most fascinating work that you were able to work on?
So two big things jump out at me. So I'll just bring you along on the journey. So org change, then I went into management consulting. That was the next best thing for me to figure out what was going on. So management consultant, consulting for a couple of years, went to business school, went back to consulting. And so there are a couple milestone kind of projects or pieces of work. One, right after business school, working at Accenture as a consultant, I had an opportunity to go to Venezuela. And I just wanted to work internationally. I put it out there and they're like, hey, we got this project in Venezuela. And I'm very much a type A planner, but that was one time I did no research. I did no research on Venezuela. I was like, hey, sign me up. I want to go. It was when Chavez was in office. Very interesting time. And so
Mhm,
what I'll say is what I learned from that project was less about the work. It was more about relationships and the people. And so
mm,
because I didn't speak Spanish very well, our meetings would have to be double the normal time because we'd have to translate back and forth between English and Spanish. So that was one. So I had to figure out a way to communicate my value outside of just communicating and being a lead on the project. And that the way I did that was spending time with the people that worked at this organization in Venezuela, and they spoke English, and getting
mhm,
to know them. And what I learned is when we would go out to the companies that they served, or not even companies, but they were a distributor of Pepsi, and they would work with people that were at the grocery stores, but also selling out of people's garages. And that was like the largest percentage of distribution for them in Caracas. So anyway, when they would go, we'd never talk about business. They would just talk back and forth with that particular customer. And what I learned at the end of that project and during that project is while in the US we talk about relationships being paramount, but it is at the heart of business. You do not step foot on someone's property or in their store and talk business immediately. It is all about the relationship, and then the business gets done like way down. So,
yeah.
that was one of the most impactful experiences just from, like, a human connection, people perspective. I learned that no matter what the language barrier is, there's always a way to connect with people. So, I'll pause there, but, that was one of the most paramount.
That sounds fascinating. I'm curious. So, we're talking about relationships. So, you were interested in culture, you were interested in change management,
Mhm.
and you've been in companies of all kinds of different sizes, and now you help companies. What do you think is one of the biggest things that can help build and make a great culture? And then also, what's one of the biggest things that you can do that absolutely kills it?
So, in terms of building a culture, and this is a big question, right? A lot of people, I start with like, how do you define culture? And I define it as it's the essence of the feeling that's in the room or with the people when nothing is being discussed. So when people can either walk into your workspace or your company or observe a meeting and see what the culture is, it's those right uncommunicated kind of experiences that you experience in an organization. So that's the first piece. Building of culture, I think it always starts with, and I'm speaking from a smaller company perspective.
Okay.
Who's at the top? So we always some companies will say we're not very strong on hierarchy. We want everyone to have a voice. Yes, that's wonderful. And yet everyone is looking to the top for communication, for demonstration, and for, in some ways, it sounds bad, but reprimandation, or if that's a word,
Yeah.
reprimanding people
Yeah.
step outside of the norms of a culture. Um,
Mhm.
so that leadership voice, whether it's a founder of a company, the demonstration of that leader's actions and who they hire and who they actually let stay and become ambassadors of that culture in their leadership team, that is really important.
Mhm.
Now, one way that I've seen cultures being torn down or eroded is when leadership does not actually listen to their people. And I've had a couple experiences in an organization as well as supporting and consulting and coaching with organizations where leaders say they want to hear what's going on, but when it's put down with clear data and evidence, well, no, they find a way to contradict it. No, we do
Mhm.
this, or no, we offer this. Well, there's a disconnect there. That's one way that I would say a culture is eroded or broken down.
Mhm. You then decided to leave corporate to start your own company. So I'm interested in hearing why you decided to make that leap.
Okay. So, what I'll say is remember, I've worked in a corporate space for over 20 years, which means I experimented with different companies. And you'll hear me use the term experimentation because it's how I've decided to live my life, right? And what happened was I was trying to move towards greater alignment in
Mhm.
each company and each role that I would take, I wanted to feel fulfilled. And so I always say I had a primary career path and then a parallel career path. And the parallel career path was when I discovered this thing called coaching, and that was the container. But it was when I was facilitating a session or really getting creative and using my strategy work with human connection. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do that type of work in my full time day to day, but there were smaller moments. And so I discovered coaching. I went to get training. I would coach on the side. So ever since I discovered coaching, I was in pursuit of alignment. How can I bring business together with this desire for coaching, elevating people, specifically around leadership, was
Mhm.
really something that was at the center. So each step, I thought it would be the one. And what I realized was, well, in hindsight, let me pause for a second there. So I left one organization and went to a startup. The startup was focused on coaching, and I thought that would be it. And it was a wonderful couple years helping to build that startup. And I led everything from ethics and quality to our training and development, our community for our coaches. And there was a point when I started to get a little jealous of the coaches. And so we were putting out all of this amazing training and giving them this opportunity. And I was like, man, I kind of want to do what they're doing again. So that
Yeah.
was a bit of a signal. The second part was I was married, I had young kids, and I experienced my own journey of burnout. Because I was giving everything to this organization, I didn't have any clear boundaries. And I really reached a point where it started to impact my sleep, my health, and my marriage. And
Yeah.
so there was always a plan between me and my husband for me to be able to do my own thing. So we were preparing and saving and things like that. But there reached a point where he said, as well as my mother, which my mother is not very she's very risk averse. And she said,
Okay.
it's time for you to quit. And so
Oh.
I quit that job. And then I took a 6 month, what I call it was a Sabbath slash sabbatical. Most people take a sabbatical and they like travel the world or have some big intention. My intention was to do nothing, which was part to just rehab and heal my body. And then part of it was for me to have choice in deciding what I could do in my day. So every day I would wake up and say, what would be meaningful for me to do today? And it could be a museum, it could be watching Real Housewives. Or so after a couple months of having clarity, having the space to not be committed to anything, my intention was to go back to an organization. But when I had opportunities that were amazing, things I would have jumped at months before, everything in my body was saying no. I would just recoil at the thought of going into an organization again, and mainly because as you know, and everyone knows, when you go into that first year, you have to be on, right? That first year really matters in terms of your learning and your impact. And I didn't have the energy.
Mm.
So that was another cue for me. And I said, hey, I'm already out here, which means out without a job. See if I can experiment and make something of the work that I've been wanting to do, which was executive coaching. So I made the decision. All right, I'm doing this full time. And that's where it began.
I love it. And I love your business name, Life Under Innovation. That
Yes.
is such a creative name, especially for leadership, executive coaching. I'm curious what that means to you.
So I came up with the name when I was working in an organization, and I was at lunch, and the area that I was working in was under construction. And there was, the big yellow banners under construction. And I don't know where it all came from, but it hit me and I was like, "Ah, life under construction." That's
Mm.
how I feel right now, right? My life is under construction. But then I thought, well, construction feels very weighty and big machines, and that doesn't have the feeling for me that I want. And then I changed it to innovation. And so you've heard me use the term experimentation a lot. The way I came up with the name and leaned into it was because when I go back to like chemistry class in high school, I remember having the beakers and you're putting stuff in and there's an explosion. And, the teacher's like, don't put too much in. And then something blows up and everyone's like,
Yeah.
yay. And there was an energy around experimentation. You didn't
Mhm.
expect it to be perfect. You actually didn't know what was to come. And I love that energy. And the people that I had talked to while I was coaching on the side, and even my own experience, there was this heavy weight when we talked about our life decisions, whether it was a career, a move. And so that's where I came up with the name. And then I decided that's the brand. So this was probably
Mm.
15 years ago when I decided on that name. And then if you fast forward to now, working in organizations, I did think about rebranding. And I said, you know what? I've never had anyone say, I'm not going to work with her because of that brand name. So it stayed with me. It anchors me to like the mission and the work that I want to do. So yeah, that's the name.
I would like to think that it also sends a very clear signal that you are not and maybe you identify with this or you don't, but that like you're not the typical person who might come in, right? Like you're not going to fit within that box. You're actually going to help them expand, and it's not just professional, but it is personal. I will say, when I had leadership coaching in the law firm, not only did it make me a better leader, it helped me in my own life.
And that's it.
There's so many soft skills.
Yes. And we often create this separation between work and home. I dislike the term work-life balance for a lot of reasons. One, it leads with work when really work is just one piece of the overall life pie. So I do anchor to it. I don't shy away from the life under innovation. And if you go to my website, you'll see I've been intentional about I have this scroll where it's life, team, culture, leadership under innovation because that's the essence of it. And yes, when people bring me in, I want them to understand that there's a bigger picture beyond just the leadership. The way someone shows up in their company as a leader should be very much aligned with who they are. We talk about the balance and the brilliance of bringing diverse thinking and different perspectives and bringing your full self to work. Well, how can we expect leaders to do that if we aren't acknowledging that who they are at their core outside of work is not an important part of who they should show up as at work? So, very much an integrated perspective.
Speaking of your website, I have looked at it and it is gorgeous. You have a beautiful, beautiful website.
Can I just say, I just launched it. I just launched it.
Congratulations. I hope you're proud because it looks amazing. And for those listening, I mean, you need to go check out Tanisha anyway. But if you are in business for yourself and you're always like working on marketing, like it's so clear, it is so concise, it looks gorgeous, so it's lifeunderinnovation.com and we'll put that in the show notes. But you brought it up. And so I just have to tell you, it looks amazing.
Thank you. I'll just say one more thing about that. So
Yeah.
I just launched it. I went from a shift from personal branding to company brand. And so I've had this personal page that was me at the center. It's been really important for me in this next stage to shift and make sure the messaging was aligned, that it's not just me. So I have a team of coaches.
Mhm.
I'm working with organizations. And so I was just excited for you to name that because you put a lot of time and heart into the messaging, and so I'm glad that it's come across that way.
Absolutely. You nailed it. You totally nailed it.
Thank you.
So you talk about experimentation, and you were always willing to experiment with your career and try new things. And yet, we know so many people whom we love. They are our friends, they are our family, they're our colleagues who stay in a job forever and they're miserable.
Mhm.
They feel so unfulfilled. And they don't really tend to do anything about it. So I'm curious, with everyone you've worked with, have you like do you have thoughts on why people feel unfulfilled and why they don't want to experiment and change?
Mm. So 2 questions. I'll start with the first one and recognize this is my framework and my thinking based off of my
Mhm.
client base. So I will not say it's a solution for everyone. So the first question, why are people lacking fulfillment?
Yeah.
So I describe it as this battle and tension between success and significance. And so part of my framework is helping people to redefine what success is. So the success part of the equation is usually externally based, right? So obviously money, recognition, titles. And oftentimes that was developed from us, especially our generation as children. I always say for me, especially as a Black woman, my parents' focus was education, right? So they overemphasized on the importance of education for me and what I'm focused on for my kids, it's education, but it's also exposure. And so with the I would say burden, with that expectation that you are going to go to school, you're going to achieve. It was all about like achieve, achieve, achieve. And we're brought up in a education system in a culture that is focused on getting the A. What we are missing and what we either forget or don't spend enough time on is alignment. So, alignment to what? Alignment to your values. What's most important to you at this particular moment? Okay. The second is our strengths, which I define as zone of genius. But your values, your zone of genius, where are you uniquely positioned to work in a space where you are uplifted and you can do it better than most people.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third is vision. Actually, we don't allow most people have an idea of what they want to do. And when I spend 1 or 2 sessions with people, they're like, "I don't know what I wanna do." And I'm able to get at, "Okay, so tell me, what it," we work through some things, and then you'll see this lightning of them visually, where people will say anything from, "Oh, I want to start a bakery," or, "I wanna do this," and I'm like, "Okay." Or, "When I was a kid, I really wanted to do this." So, we are aware, it just depends on what level of consciousness we've allowed it to either come up or we've pushed it down. We are aware of the things that we want, but we feel like oftentimes we're going to disappoint someone, our parents. Oh, we're looking at our friends, they're over here, they have this car or whatever. So there's this whole group of expectations, a category of expectations around success that we lean.
Mhm.
The other side is what I call significance. So, what is the impact that you want to have in the world? What are your values? When you strip everything down, if you could spend your time doing one or two or three different things, what would it do? Or what would you do? So, if you just simply ask people those questions, you'll get an idea of what would come up. And so, when people start to remove and reduce the tension around value alignment and going against the grain. Oh, but I'm going to take this job because if I just take it, I could just make more money and
Mm.
then I can have kids.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's and then I can do all of these things. So that's what I found to be from my clients and even my own experience, the biggest source of dissatisfaction and unfulfillment. It's just that awareness and that acknowledgement that where I am today is not where I want to be. And then taking the steps to get clear on what potential opportunities or next steps may be.
Mhm. And is that why people stay stuck? Is either they're not acknowledging or recognizing it, or maybe they are and they just don't know how to do it. So then it's like, well,
I
I don't
think
want to be disappointed, so I'm not going to focus on this too much.
Yeah, I think there's a piece of both. One, there's the clarity part. So people are looking for clarity. What should I do next? Which coaching is a wonderful way to help with the clarity. Then it's the action. Okay, so do I believe that actually I can achieve it?
Yeah.
So just and I work with people that are extremely high achieving. They have a record of success, if you will, on paper. but they still will not focus and believe on that they can do certain things, right, in
Yep.
the future. And
Yep.
oftentimes it seems very easy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Meaning we are used to like the hard work. Let me go and let me go have 10 interviews. It's like, wait a minute. How might you make this a little bit easier with greater alignment? And once I start to help people identify those things, they're like, huh, oh, boy, right? And then you see this like physical lean in, lean out. They're like, wait a minute. Oh, but okay. And I'll just say, what other excuse are you going to come up with? Let's battle them all.
Right.
Battle them all. So that's also where this experimentation comes in because I don't coach people to quit their jobs. I don't necessarily coach people to like, you should just go out and leave. No, let's experiment. If you have this idea or this vision for what your life will look like, you want to move to Bali, right? Okay, well, let's experiment. Maybe we start with let's do some research about what it might look even before you get on the airplane. Okay, all right. How might you plan a vacation to Bali for a week, right? How might you speak to someone who actually lives there? So let's just start experimenting with what this vision of yours could look like.
I love that because, I said so many people stay and don't leave, but the the opposite of that is there's also a lot of people who just run, right? Like they just go to the next thing
Mhm.
and they take their baggage with them. So I love that you help people unpack it and actually explore and experiment while they're in the job because it might work. It might work exactly where they are. And if not, then they've got choices. I know we don't have a ton of time left. Who are your favorite people to work with? For those who are listening, maybe who have never had an executive coach, or let's say they work for a company and they're like, our company could use this. How do I get this? How do I get Tanisha and her team like in my company? How do they know if they're a good fit?
First, let me just say, I recognize this is coming from a very privileged place, this conversation. There are people that have to be in their particular jobs that may not be in fulfillment and alignment. So I'll just
Yeah.
name so personally, so I do coach individually. I call my work executive coaching and also strategic advisory. So the role that I play in organizations is working with those leaders that are at the very top. So either senior executives or their leadership teams, serving as their coach, but also their business partner.
Mhm.
In terms of coaching is very inquiry based, but the business partner is okay, how can we think about your growth, but also the cascading effect to your team? So, the types of organizations I like to work with. I work with private equity backed companies. So, those individuals and those organizations are usually a little bit smaller. There's usually a very kind of basic industry or model, but there's a high expectation of growth. And you're doing it with constrained resources. So, that way, we're focusing on what are the needs of your organization from a people standpoint, but also helping your leaders who may be either a little junior or may not have the depth of experience that those at larger companies may have. What are the critical leadership skills that you need to be thinking about? From a talent perspective, how do you assess talent? How do you hire and fire? How do you think about culture? How do you also think about performance? So, how do you get high productivity from your team, but also strong motivation? So, that's a particular industry that I really enjoy working with. But it's these organizations that are at a bit of an inflection point in their growth, and they are going to be constrained by the drag of people. Oftentimes, companies will grow very quickly, but they are not either investing in their people as quickly for them to grow. So that's where we come in and we really think about okay, how can coaching be an anchor? But then also, are there leadership development programs that can be supported? Is there assessment work? Are there team dynamics at play that we can support you with? So that's from an organization standpoint. And then, for an individual, the individuals that I personally love to work with are those in a state of transition. And by transition, it's almost less about the physical transition, meaning I'm going from job to job or I am moving to a new organization. It's the mindset. So when people come to me and I hear I'm stuck, I don't want to feel like this any longer
Mm.
or I want to build confidence. That's the biggest transition. It's the mindset. Once we work on the mindset, then everything else cascades. Your role, we can talk about how you show up as a leader. We can talk about what the impact on your relationship is or you as a parent. So that mindset is the core of behavior change. And so that's really, those are the types of individuals that I look for. I actually salivate and get excited when people come and they're like, "What's up?" And I'm like, yeah. And they're looking like, why are you so excited? And I was like, that's what I like to hear because within 3 months, you will start to feel a shift and you will not expect it. But when you look back, you're going to say, wow, I had no idea that I could be thinking differently. I could be operating differently. I could be assessing and making decisions differently. So those are the types of individuals that I personally like to work
I guarantee there's some people listening right now that are like the perfect fit for you. And they're probably like, I could really use some help. So everyone, I will put in all of the show notes, again, everything that you can follow, social media, all of that. But you want to sign up for Tanisha's newsletter, because if you do, then you're going to receive a leadership planner for free. So her newsletter is called The Leadership Edge. Do you want to share with everyone what the leadership planner is that they can get if they sign up?
Yes, and so the newsletter, it's all about your edge, and by the edge, I mean pushing you to the edge of excellence, your leadership edge. And so, what you can expect is once a week you'll receive a focused topic that will help you elevate your leadership. And then, as Heather mentioned, there's a bonus. So I put together a planner for the year for you to think and take some intentional time about where you need to be focused and what types of support you might need in terms of having the impact that you want to have as an individual, but also obviously throughout your particular organization.
I love it. Okay, everybody, go grab that. All the links will be in the show notes. Tanisha, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your wisdom today.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.